let's get into a review of Smile 2022.
Well, sometimes that is better.
Hey everybody, what's up? KillJoy Jake here, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. Today we're going to be doing a little review of Smile, but before we get into that, I'm going to need y'all to like this video and subscribe for more horror content. Now, before we get into both a non-spoiler and spoiler review, we're going to talk a little bit about this movie. After witnessing a bizarre traumatic incident involving a patient, Dr. Rose Cotter starts experiencing frightening occurrences that she can't explain. As an overwhelming terror begins taking over her life, Rose must confront her troubling past in order to survive and escape her horrifying new reality. The film was written and directed by up-and-comer Parker Finn, and the music was composed by Cristobal Tapia de Veer. This movie stars Sosie Bacon, Kevin Bacon's daughter, Jesse T. Usher, A-Train from The Boys, and also Kyle Gallner, that weird guy from Scream 2022. I had an absolute blast with Smile. This is a very fun horror film that I highly recommend taking a bunch of your buddies to go see this weekend. I know on the surface this seems like your same old horror movie, like it follows a plot line that's very similar to that of The Ring or something like Drag Me to Hell, very similar to Drag Me to Hell too, but it's definitely different enough to garner its own recognition. It has a certain tone that its predecessors don't have, and I actually love Sosie Bacon's portrayal of this same old character. She makes it so much more different, and this like continuously more stressed out version of the character that we get that throughout the film. It's like this awesome build. I've never seen it done as well as Sosie Bacon's performance here. This movie does a really good job at paying respect to the movies from the past 15 years that absolutely inspired this one. This feels like an overture of all the horror movies we've gotten just from the past 15 years. It's kind of bizarre. There's influences from movies like Hereditary and Drag Me to Hell, The Babadook, It Follows, Evil Dead 2013. I mean, name a big horror movie from the past 15 years. There's something about this movie that was inspired by that. The music and sound design here is so well done and aids some of the jump scares. But let me tell you, this movie is not just about the jump scares, it's also a lot about the psychological terror too. Without spoiling anything, there are two sequences in this movie specifically, maybe actually three, where it's all about just real life terror, and it's fucking terrifying. Fans of movies like Insidious and Sinister will really like this movie, but if you also hate those movies for just being like jump scare reliant or whatever, if that's your argument about those films, I personally disagree with that, but you may actually like this movie too, because it also hits on some psychological horror that's really well done. And even though this movie does pay homage to a bunch of horror movies from the past 15 years that it was clearly influenced by, it never feels like it's ripping them off. It's more like a thank you for this awesome influence. Thank you for making this badass horror movie. This feels like an overture of the past 15 years of horror all smack dab in one place. For that, I think it's beautiful. I highly recommend this movie, and I had an absolute blast watching this last night. I was so terrified I could barely sleep, so that's why I look half asleep right now. Getting into some spoilers, so just so you know, you have been warned. Spoilers ahead, do not watch any further. I'm gonna be $150 with y'all. Smile scared the ever-loving shit out of me. I was serious about that no sleep thing. I had to put on like rain sounds and everything, otherwise it was going to be Nightmare City up here, and that's just not fun. Not a good time. Don't recommend it. On the surface, this seems like your stereotypical horror movie. It's about a girl who has to do something in 7 days or she dies. I mean, you've seen that movie a million times. So there's so many different examples, and I've already named a bunch of those in the non-spoiler review. But there's some nice nuances throughout that gives this movie a very specific tone that movies like The Ring or Drag Me to Hell just don't have. Like, for example, there's these really funny and sometimes really dark character moments that either make you laugh or just make you feel awful. Kyle Gallner plays a cop in this movie who is kind of like working with Sosie Bacon, trying to get down to what the heck is going on here. And then he like kind of hits on her in this earlier scene. And then when she's kind of like, yeah, no, sorry, got a fiance, walks away. And then this nurse proceeds to tell him she's single, which I think is really outrageous and pretty funny. It feels very like absurdist a little bit too. And you have nice little moments of that throughout this entire film that really give you this spot of color in this very, very bleak movie. There's some really nice dark humor in this film too, centered around Sosie Bacon's nephew character. And when Sosie goes to her sister's house, she has this like freak out in the car afterwards during that scene, and you just see the character like looking out the window. I don't know why, but I just thought that was so funny. Like, I was just cracking up the entire time. Maybe I'm an awful human being, but I just think that's really funny. I was also like the only one laughing in the entire theater too. I was really trying to keep it under wraps. And to expand on what I was saying in the non-spoiler review, this movie does have a lot of jump scares. That is a big factor in this movie of how it scares you, but it also focuses a lot on psychological dread. There are entire scare sequences without jump jump scares that are totally focused on the psychological horror of something real, like something really traumatic that happens to people. And that is pretty well done here. It's really well written and really terrifying. I know some people just hate jump scares. I personally don't understand that. I think they're really well done and they're hard to set up. Like, it is not an easy thing to do in film, and I don't understand why people think like, oh man, movies are so reliant on that. This is a fun movie, man. This is a really nice fun movie that you can go watch with your buddies. Don't take it too seriously, because like there's some really over the top moments that are kind of absurd and weird. Like, there's like this one part towards the end of the movie where you have her therapist character, obviously Sosie Bacon also plays a therapist, but her therapist comes over at one point and the twist is, oh my god, it was actually the smiling entity or whatever the fuck. And that thing starts like walking after her and like talking to her and shit. It feels very Sam Raimi, and it almost feels out of place because you don't really have that tone towards the beginning of the film, but as the movie goes along, it starts getting more absurd and more like crazier, which I kind of like. It really spins out of control and feels really chaotic. Caitlin Stasey is also fucking terrifying in this movie. She has this sequence which is a total homage to Hereditary, the beginning of that movie, where you have the mom just standing there and Toni Collette is like looking at her, and it's terrifying. Caitlin Stasey kind of does the same thing here. You can barely see her because it's a dark room, but like her face is very clearly there smiling. Oh, it's gross. The only real problem I had with this movie writing wise was Jesse T. Usher and Kyle Gallner's character. They're both these love interests, but by the end of the movie, it almost makes you question why they weren't the same character. Jesse T. Usher unfortunately disappears halfway through this movie and never comes back, and his character really never fulfills any purpose to the plot overall, and that makes me a little sad. They probably should have just made Sosie Bacon's fiance, husband, partner, character, whatever, a cop already who could have helped her investigate this further, and they could have had like a better relationship, I think. It really doesn't affect the plot at all that these two start fighting and their relationship crumbles. Like, it's a really big thing in the movie, but it doesn't go anywhere. That's really my only complaint though. Like, this is the guy's first film that he wrote and directed, and it's pretty damn impressive. I really liked it. This feels very different, even though yes, it has that familiar aspect to it. Rob Morgan is also in this movie, who is very underrated and in like everything from the past 5 years. I think he's a great actor, and he also gives an amazing little, well, kind of cameo appearance here. He's barely in the movie, but when he is, he shines, and it's a really terrifying scene between him and Sosie Bacon. When he starts screaming in that jail cell, there's just something really fucking terrifying about that. There's a lot of side characters in this movie that have like great performances, Rob Morgan's being the standout to me, but you also have this widow character. I can't remember which actress portrayed her, maybe Judy Reyes. Yeah, Victoria Munoz. She gives this performance that is terrifying, and once again, maybe only has a minute on screen. When Sosie Bacon's character goes to this widow's house and starts asking questions, trying to figure out like what happened to her husband so she can learn more about her own situation, we have this character like freaking out on her and screaming and being like, get out of my house, and all this. That was really terrifying to me. I don't know, with the sound design just was so unsettling. I felt like I wanted to look away almost. Like it was almost worse than some of the jump scares, this whole sequence. Either way, those are the two sequences I was talking about in the non-spoiler section if you watched that. I fucking loved those two scenes though. Like, not only were the jump scares really effective, there was this one from the fucking side. I don't even want to get into it. That was terrifying. But those were really well done, but this was also effectively scary, and that's impressive. You don't see that a lot in movies like this. Typically they are jump scare reliant, not that that's a bad thing, but typically that's where the scares come from. It was really cool to see this movie splash around in different pools, not just the one, I guess. And the ending of this movie is like almost exactly Drag Me to Hell. It's the one thing that I'm like, okay, this is like nearly a ripoff because of how close this is to that film. But once again, I want to reiterate this. I don't feel like this movie is ever ripping anything off. It never feels like that. It always feels like it's paying homage and sending a little thank you letter to all of these awesome movies from the past 15 years. And in a weird sort of way, this movie feels like an overture of like the past 15 years of horror. It's like it's kind of taken all the really big horror movies and really big sequences, spitting them all into one movie and just making it its own thing. Smile gets an 8 out of 10 from me. And I would have gone higher, but like I was kind of talking about that weird writing thing. Some of the digital effects are a little spotty at times. It gets an 8 out of 10. It's still a great movie though. I fucking loved it. It's one of my favorites of the year, I think, for sure. What did you guys think about Smile though? Leave me your rating in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching this brand new review video of Smile. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more horror content. If you want to support this page further, you can support me on Patreon or become a channel member by clicking that join button on my page. Thank you guys so much for watching again, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.